Do it. Number 10. The Roman Empire and Han China. The year is 97 CE. A Chinese general named Gan Ying stands on the shores of the Persian Gulf, staring west across the shimmering water. He has been sent by the Han dynasty on a mission that sounds like a suicide pact: travel to the edge of the known world and make contact with the legendary Da Qin, the Great Qin. This was the Chinese name for the Roman Empire. Gan Ying was the Neil Armstrong of his day, poised to make the first contact between the dragon and the eagle. But as he prepared to sail, the local Parthian sailors, who made a fortune acting as middlemen between the two empires, lied to him. They told him the ocean was vast, filled with sirens, and that the wind would blow him into oblivion, claiming the trip would take 2 years. Terrified, Gan Ying turned back. He was this close to changing history. While Gan Ying failed, the artifacts didn't. The connection between Rome and China is a story of insatiable consumerism that defied geography. The Huhan Shu, the official history of the later Han, explicitly describes Da Qin. Their kings are not permanent. They are tall and have regular features like the Chinese. This isn't a myth, it's a scouting report. We have found Roman glass beads in the tombs of Gwangju, Korea. We have found Roman gold medallions in Ok Ao, Vietnam, which was the maritime gateway to China. On the Roman side, the obsession with Chinese silk was so intense it nearly bankrupted the empire. Pliny the Elder, the Roman historian, famously ranted that Rome was bleeding 100 million sesterces a year to the east to pay for luxury goods for Roman women. That is a trade deficit that would make modern economists sweat. In 166 CE, the Chinese records claim an embassy finally arrived from a king named An Dun, almost certainly the Roman emperor Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. They brought ivory, rhinoceros horn, and tortoiseshell. They knew the other existed, they knew the other was powerful. The mainstream explanation is a wet blanket. Historians argued that the embassy of 166 CE wasn't an official diplomatic mission, but likely a group of desperate Roman merchants posing as ambassadors to get a tax break. The Parthian Empire, modern Iran, sat squarely between them, blocking direct contact to protect their markup on silk. So Rome and China were like two giants staring at each other across a crowded room, separated by a jealous bouncer, never quite shaking hands. But while these empires were kept apart by greed, two others were kept apart by something even thicker: the most dangerous jungle on Earth. Number 9. The Aztec civilization and the Inca Empire. Picture two heavyweight boxers in the same ring, both blindfolded, swinging wildly. In the 15th century, the Aztec Empire dominated Mesoamerica with a blood-soaked iron fist, ruling from the island city of Tenochtitlan. At the exact same time, to the south, the Inca Empire was engineering mountain cities in the Andes that defy modern physics. These were the two apex predators of the Americas. They were separated by roughly 2,000 miles of land, a distance shorter than the Silk Road or the Roman March to Britain. Logic dictates they should have clashed, traded, or at least swapped recipes. The cultural parallels are frustratingly precise, suggesting they were drinking from the same well of ideas. Both empires operated under a theocratic solar cult, Huitzilopochtli for the Aztecs, Inti for the Inca. Both managed massive multi-ethnic populations through a complex tribute system rather than direct assimilation. Both lacked the utility of the wheel for transport and possessed no iron tools, yet built monumental stone architecture that we still can't replicate today. But the smoking gun is the metallurgy. By 800 CE, metalworking techniques for copper and bronze appeared in western Mexico. These techniques were identical to those developed centuries earlier in the Andes, Peru, or Ecuador. We also find the spondylus shell, a thorny oyster native to Ecuador, appearing in high-status Aztec offerings. The trade goods moved, the technology moved, the ideas were flowing north. The twist is the silence. Despite the flow of goods, there is zero record of direct contact. Montezuma didn't know Atahualpa existed. Historians argue that the Darien Gap, that dense, impassable swamp between Panama and Colombia, acted as a natural firewall, halting the spread of armies and llamas alike. They argue for independent invention driven by similar environmental pressures. But does parallel evolution really explain why two cultures, oblivious to one another, both decided that the only way to keep the sun rising was through the ritual sacrifice of human blood? But if you think land barriers are tough, try crossing the Indian Ocean in a boat made of reeds. Number 8. Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley Civilization. Let's rewind to 2300 BCE. You're walking through the bustling, dusty markets of in ancient Sumer, modern-day Iraq. Among the locals selling grain, wool, and beer, you spot a merchant with darker skin, speaking a foreign tongue, selling exotic carnelian beads, ivory combs, and screeching peacocks. He isn't a traveler, he lives here. He calls his homeland Meluha. For decades, this place was a myth to archaeologists, an Atlantis of the East, until they realized Meluha wasn't a legend. It was the Indus Valley Civilization, 1,500 miles away in modern-day Pakistan. The evidence here isn't speculative, it is a bureaucratic paper trail. We have found Indus Valley cylinder seals, essentially ancient corporate ID cards used to stamp clay shipments deep in Mesopotamian ruins like Kish and Umma. We found Mesopotamian weights and measures in the Indus city of Harappa. The trade was so established that there was likely a permanent Meluhan village established in Sumer, functioning like an ancient Chinatown or Little Italy. They traded copper, gold, ivory, and lapis lazuli on an industrial scale. Textual evidence from the Akkadian period even mentions ships from Meluha docking at the quays of Akkad. This wasn't accidental drift, this was a corporate shipping lane that operated for centuries before the pyramids of Giza were even finished. The explanation is straightforward economics. The Persian Gulf is a relatively calm highway for sailors hugging the coast. But here's the kicker. Despite this intense commercial relationship, their cultures remained stubbornly distinct. The Indus people rejected the Mesopotamian writing system, cuneiform, their government structure, kings, and their weapons. They took the money, but left the ideology. It makes you wonder, was this the first example of globalization where people wanted the goods, but absolutely hated the culture? And speaking of culture clashes, let's look at a face that shouldn't exist in the history books. Number 7. The Olmec Civilization and West Africa. In 1862, a farm worker in Veracruz, Mexico, tripped over something hard in the dirt. He started digging and uncovered a stone head. Not a statue, a colossus. Standing 9 feet tall and weighing 20 tons, the face stared back with full lips, a broad nose, and wearing a tight-fitting helmet. It didn't look like the local indigenous people. To many observers, this face looked unmistakably African. This is the Olmec civilization, the mother culture of Mexico that predates the Maya and Aztecs. And these 17 colossal heads have sparked one of the most vicious, blood-boiling fights in the entire field of archaeology. This is where we get into the tribal debate, so pick your side. Researcher Ivan van Sertima, in his book They Came Before Columbus, argued that the ocean currents from West Africa act as a conveyor belt directly to the Gulf of Mexico. He pointed to the African physiognomy of the colossal heads and claimed that Nubian or Egyptian sailors reached the Americas thousands of years before Columbus. Supporters point to more than just the faces. They highlight the presence of cotton strains that seem to be hybrids of African and American varieties. They point to the similarities in gold-tipped spears. They even argue that certain Olmec glyphs resemble the Mende script of West Africa. It's a theory that suggests the Atlantic wasn't a wall, but a bridge long before the Vikings or Columbus set sail. Mainstream archaeology slams this door shut with aggressive force. They argue that the African features are actually stylized representations of local indigenous rulers, designed to look like a jaguar-human hybrid, a common motif in Olmec religion. Furthermore, genetic studies of ancient remains in the area show 0 African DNA markers from that period. It's widely considered a coincidence of artistic style, pareidolia, not contact. Here's your tribal trigger. Historians say it's just art and coincidence. Alternative theorists say it's suppressed history and racism in academia. Is looking at a statue and seeing a different race pseudoscience? Or are we underestimating the capabilities of ancient black sailors? Go to the comments. Team coincidence or team contact? Fight it out. While you argue, Let's sail to another island shrouded in mist and secrecy. Number 6. Phoenicia and Ancient Britain. The Phoenicians were the CIA of the ancient world. Based in modern-day Lebanon, they were the supreme sailors of the Mediterranean, famous for hoarding maritime secrets. They invented the alphabet, but they also invented industrial espionage. Ancient Greek texts speak of the Cassiterides, or the Tin Islands, a foggy, distant place where the Phoenicians sourced the metal essential for making bronze. For centuries, the location was a jealously guarded state secret. If a Roman ship tried to follow a Phoenician captain to find the source, the Phoenician would deliberately wreck his own ship on the rocks rather than reveal the route. That secret location? Cornwall, England. We know that tin from Cornwall has a specific chemical signature, and ingots of this British tin have been discovered in shipwrecks off the coast of Israel and Turkey dating back to the Bronze Age. In 2019, researchers confirmed that tin ingots found in Haifa were smelted in Britain. This implies that 3,000 years ago, Phoenician sailors were navigating the treacherous waters of the Atlantic, past the Pillars of Hercules, Gibraltar, battling the Bay of Biscay, all the way to the gloomy coasts of England. We even have accounts of a Carthaginian explorer named Himilco who sailed to the Tin Islands around 450 BCE, describing sea monsters and thick seaweed, likely a dramatized report to scare off competitors. The twist is that there's very little Phoenician pottery in Britain. Why? Because they likely didn't settle. They docked on the shore, traded their purple dye and glass for the tin, and got out before anyone could see their maps. It wasn't colonization, it was a smash-and-grab resource run. It proves that ancient primitive sailors could navigate the roughest oceans on Earth just to make a buck. But if the Mediterranean could reach Britain, could the Egyptians reach somewhere even further? Number 5. Ancient Egypt and the land of Punt. On the walls of Queen Hatshepsut's temple at Deir el-Bahari, carved in stunning relief, is a travel log that puts modern documentaries to shame. It depicts a massive Egyptian naval expedition to a place called the Land of Punt. The carvings depict Egyptian ships returning heavy with gold, ebony, ivory, wild animals like leopards and giraffes, and most importantly, live frankincense trees with their roots still in baskets. This wasn't a raid, it was a diplomatic shopping spree to a place they reverently called Ta Neter, the land of the gods. The problem, for over 100 years, archaeologists had absolutely no idea where Punt actually was. The illustrations are incredibly specific, serving as a biological map. They depict fish species that are only found in the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, ruling out a Mediterranean location. They depict puntites with different physical characteristics and houses built on stilts similar to structures in ancient Africa. For decades, scholars thought Punt was just a myth, a fantasy land like El Dorado, but science caught up. We now have mummified baboons brought back from Punt by the ancient Egyptians. Isotopic analysis of their hair and bones revealed they came from an area covering modern-day Eritrea, Ethiopia, and possibly Somalia. This proves the Egyptians were capable of deep-sea navigation 3,500 years ago, coordinating fleets that could dismantle ships, carry them across the desert to the Red Sea, reassemble them, and sail to the Horn of Africa. The mystery is why the connection stopped. After the New Kingdom collapsed, Punt vanishes from the records. Did the trade routes collapse? Did the land of gods get swallowed by geopolitical chaos? It proves that globalization isn't new, it's just fragile. Civilization can go backwards. And speaking of fragile connections across dangerous waters, let's look at the one that forces us to rewrite American history books completely. Number 4. The Norse and North America. We're drilled from childhood that in 1492 Columbus sailed the ocean blue. But 500 years before Columbus was even a glint in his father's eye, a Viking ship was cutting through the fog of Newfoundland. The Norse sagas, oral histories passed down for generations, tell of Leif Erikson finding a land of grapes, salmon, and self-sown wheat, a place he called Vinland. For centuries, serious historians treated this like a bedtime story, a myth of the frozen north no more real than Thor's hammer. Until 1960, when a Norwegian explorer named Helge Ingstad looked at a lumpy hill in Canada and realized it wasn't a hill, it was a house. At Losso Meadows in Newfoundland, archaeologists unearthed 8 sod buildings, iron nails, which the indigenous locals didn't possess, and a bronze ring-headed pin. But the most damning evidence? Butternut shells. Butternuts do not grow in Newfoundland. They never have. They grow much further south in what is now New Brunswick or even Maine. This proves the Vikings didn't just land on the tip of Canada, they explored deep into North America, possibly as far south as New York. They set up shop, they met the locals, whom they called Skranings. We even have the Maine penny, a Norwegian coin dating to the reign of Olaf Kyrre, 1067 to 1093, found at a Native American site in Maine, suggesting trade or contact continued long after Leif left. So why aren't we speaking Norse? Because they left. The climate cooled during the Little Ice Age, the Skraelings fought back with overwhelming numbers, and the colony was abandoned. Here is your tribal trigger. We have absolute physical proof Vikings were here first, yet we have a national holiday for Columbus, who got lost, thought he was in India, and never actually set foot on the North American mainland. Is it time to cancel Columbus Day and celebrate Leif Erikson Day? Or does the fact that the Vikings quit mean they don't get the credit? Let me know below. While the Vikings retreated, another culture was busy blending East and West in a way that seems impossible. Number 3. Ancient Greece and India. When we think of Buddhism, we think of serene statues in East Asia. When we think of Greek gods, we think of marble statues in Athens. But what if I told you there was a time when Buddha wore a Greek toga and was protected by the hero Hercules? After Alexander the Great died, he didn't just leave a power vacuum. He left thousands of Greeks stranded in what is now Afghanistan, Pakistan, and northern India. They didn't go home. They didn't die out. They built a kingdom that lasted for centuries. This is the Indo-Greek kingdom, and it is the ultimate cultural mashup. We have coins from kings like Menander I, which feature Greek writing on one side and Kharoshthi script on the other. Menander himself converted to Buddhism and is immortalized in the famous Buddhist text, The Questions of King Milinda, where he debates a sage with the logic of Socrates. But the visual evidence is the most shocking. The art from this period, known as Gandharan art, shows the Buddha not as he is depicted today, but with curly Greek hair, wearing heavy Greek drapery, standing in the contrapposto pose of a Greek athlete. In some reliefs, the Buddha's bodyguard is literally Vajrapani depicted as Hercules, holding a club and wearing a lion's skin. It is the perfect visual marriage of the Hellenistic and Hindu-Buddhist worlds. This wasn't just trade, this was a hybrid civilization. It eventually dissolved under invasions from nomadic tribes like the Scythians, but for a moment in time, Zeus and Buddha were effectively neighbors. It forces us to ask how much of Western philosophy crept into the East and how much Eastern spirituality shaped the West without us ever realizing it. Did Greek logic influence Buddhist dialectics? Did Indian asceticism influence Christian monasticism? Now from philosophy, let's move to a mystery hidden in our DNA. Number 2. Polynesia and South America. The Pacific Ocean is the largest empty space on Earth. It covers 63 million square miles, bigger than all of Earth's landmass combined. To the ancients, it should have been an endless wall of death. Yet when Captain Cook arrived in the remote islands of Polynesia, he found the locals growing a tuber known as the sweet potato. Here's the problem that drove botanists crazy for 100 years. The sweet potato is native to South America, specifically the Andes. It cannot float across the ocean on its own. It rots in salt water within days. Birds don't carry tubers that heavy. There is only one way it got to Tahiti. Someone had to carry it. It gets weirder. The Quechua word for sweet potato in the Andes is kumar. The Polynesian word for sweet potato? Kumara. It is the same word. This is linguistic DNA. In 2020, a massive genomic study analyzed the DNA of sweet potatoes and confirmed the Polynesian samples split from the South American lineage around 1100 CE, centuries before Europeans arrived. This implies that Polynesian navigators in wooden double-hulled canoes using only the stars and the swell of the waves navigated 4,000 miles against the prevailing currents, landed in South America, traded for the potato and the word, and successfully sailed back. This is the equivalent of a moon landing for the Neolithic age. Skeptics tried to claim the potatoes floated on drift debris, but the linguistic link, Kumar versus Kumara, kills that theory. Potatoes don't speak. This suggests the Polynesians were the greatest navigators in human history, treating the Pacific Ocean not as a barrier, but as a highway. But if the Polynesians could connect worlds, is it possible the two most famous ancient builders did too? Number 1. Ancient Egypt and the Maya civilization. This is the big one, the one that keeps conspiracy theorists awake at night and mainstream archaeologists drinking heavily. On one side of the Atlantic, in the sands of Egypt, rise the Great Pyramids of Giza, aligned to the cardinal points with laser precision. On the other side, in the jungles of Mexico, rise the pyramids of Teotihuacan and Chichen Itza, also aligned to the stars. Both civilizations built massive triangular tombs. Both developed hieroglyphic writing. Both possessed a calendar more accurate than the one used in Europe at the time. And both were obsessed with the journey of the soul into the afterlife. The sheer visual similarity is enough to make you pause and ask, is this a coincidence or is it a legacy? Let's look at the Orion correlation theory. Some researchers argue that the three pyramids of Giza align perfectly with the belt of Orion. Mirroring this, the layout of Teotihuacan arguably mimics the solar system or specific constellations. Both cultures practiced mummification, though the methods differed. Both used a stepped pyramid structure. The step pyramid of Djoser in Egypt looks suspiciously like the temple of Kukulkan in Mexico. Even the symbolism overlaps. The Maya worshipped the feathered serpent, the Egyptians worshipped the cobra. Both cultures used the corbelled arch in architecture. The mathematical probability of two isolated cultures choosing the exact same shape to reach the gods, aligned to the exact same celestial bodies, feels astronomically low to the average observer. It feels like they were working from the same instruction manual. Here's the buzzkill twist. They are separated by 2,500 years. The Great Pyramid was finished around 2500 BCE. The Maya thrived around 250 to 900 CE. The Egyptians were collapsing before the Maya laid their first stone. The mainstream explanation is physics. If you want to build a really tall building with stone and no steel, a pyramid is the only shape that doesn't fall over. It's convergent evolution, not shared blueprints. But does the simple physics of stacking rocks really explain why they both looked at the stars and saw the exact same stories written in the dark? Does it explain why they both obsessed over time in the exact same way? Since we are questioning everything, let's go really deep, down to the oldest pottery in the Americas. In Valdivia, Ecuador, archaeologists found pottery dating back to 3000 BCE. This was highly advanced, decorative pottery that seemingly appeared out of nowhere with no developmental primitive phase found in the archaeological record. Across the Pacific, in Japan, the Jomon culture was making pottery that looks suspiciously identical. The distinct rope pattern designs, the technique, the shape, they are twins. Betty Meggers, a legendary Smithsonian archaeologist, proposed a theory that got her laughed out of many conference rooms, but has never been fully debunked. She suggested that Jomon fishermen from Japan were swept off course by typhoons, caught the North Pacific gyre, and drifted all the way to Ecuador thousands of years ago. It sounds insane until you realize a Japanese boat from the 2011 tsunami drifted to the U.S. West Coast in 2012 without a crew. It took about a year. If a boat can do it today, a boat could do it then. And in 2013, genetic analysis of ancient Botocudo people in Brazil found Polynesian genetic markers. The ocean wasn't a wall, it was a conveyor belt. Most archaeologists reject this as trans-Pacific diffusionism lacking hard proof. They say the Valdivia pottery developed locally. But if a few fishermen survived the drift, it would rewrite the entire timeline of civilization in the Americas. It leaves us with one final, haunting thought. We tend to think of our ancestors as primitive people stuck in the mud, staring at the horizon and wondering what was out there. But the evidence, the coins in the wrong castles, the seeds on the wrong continents, the maps that know too much, suggests they were travelers, explorers, and risk-takers who made the world smaller than we give them credit for. They were connected. Maybe not by the internet, but by the same dangerous curiosity that makes you watch this video. They looked at the ocean and didn't see a barrier, they saw a road. History may be more connected than we were taught, but how connected? That's for you to decide. If you want to join a group of people who question the official narrative, you know what to do. Click that subscribe button and ring the bell. It's the only way to get initiated into the next mystery.